So I went to a very particular fact that I feel like is one of those facts that you learn when you're a kid, like at some point, or at least that I learned when I was a kid and always sort of stuck with me, which is that cow farts cause global warming.
And your kid brain goes, haha, farts.
Right, exactly. That's why it stuck with me for so long. Which actually, it turns out that's not 100% true. It turns out it's cow burps that cause global warming. It is methane that's the reason, but they're not farting it out. They're burping it out because of the way their stomachs work. Which I was not gonna lie, a little bit sad to find out. But I mean, burps are still funny too, I guess, but not as funny as farts. But anyway, so I immediately started thinking about, well, if all the cows are gone, how much of an impact is this actually going to have on humanity's attempts to stop, burning themselves alive? So, first thing I got to figure out, how much do cows actually contribute to global warming? So, it turns out that every year a single cow is going to belch out about 220 pounds of methane. For comparison, I figured I'd go with something that we all know, a little more reasonably. I want to see how much CO2 a car produces. Different greenhouse gas, but you can at least, get sort of frame of reference there. And it turns out via the EPA that a typical passenger vehicle emits about 4.6 metric tons of carbon dioxide per year, which is about 10,000 pounds and clearly much more than 220 pounds of methane. However, it also turns out that there is a different greenhouse gases had different effects on the warming of the planet. And specifically, methane has about 28 times more warming potential than CO2 does. Which means that 220 pounds of methane is about the equivalent of around 6,000 pounds of CO2, or about 3/5 of a car each year. There is one other key difference that's going to be more important later as well, which is that one of the big problems with CO2 is that it stays in the atmosphere like for centuries. It's like 300 to 1,000 years. Methane only stays in for about 12. So that is a lot more, convenient. That's also kind of why we focus on CO2 mostly. I found it very funny that 12 times 28 is about 330. So it is 28 times worse, but stays in the atmosphere for like a 28th of the time, which I thought was kind of cute. Anyway, it also means that it actually turns out that if you have a herd of cattle and the size stays constant, it's actually carbon neutral, like the cows themselves, after 12 years, because they'll keep producing the same amount of methane, but the methane that they already produced will go away, which I thought was kind of interesting.
I don't think I've ever heard someone describe global warming as cute.
I described I described a certain, math-based fact about global warming as cute. I guess that kind of works. Whatever, it's
the
fine.
Numerology of global warming is cute objectively, Chris, obviously. Maybe hop off Ben's back here.
The neutrality of cows' effects on global warming is kind of cute, which is a little bit wordier. Anyway, point being, overall, so what we see is that, a couple of cows is roughly equivalent to a car. And there actually are almost as many cows in the U.S. as there are cars. There's about 94 million cows in the U.S., apparently. It's weirdly hard to find out how many cars are in the United States. Apparently this is very hard to figure out because of the way that the easiest way to do it would be vehicle registrations, but those get reported across a lot of different kinds of vehicles, and they're not separated out very well. The estimates I saw were based on both that and some census data, and wound up being about 111 million. So basically, long story short, if we did get rid of all the cows once that methane went away, it would be basically like we got rid of all the cars in the United States. Which feels like a lot, personally. Also, I guess that was also just for the US, those numbers. So, feels like a lot. Now, the question is, does it actually, does that matter? Would getting rid of all the cows and having that impact on greenhouse gases actually do anything to global warming? So, I looked at the Paris Climate Agreement, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a UN, there was a convention on climate change that sort of came up with this agreement around greenhouse gas emissions and stuff like that. And the long-term goal was basically to keep the global temperature increase to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, ideally 1.5 degrees Celsius above. And that was decided basically once you get above 1.5 degrees, the frequency and intensity of climate impacts, storms and things like that is going to increase pretty drastically. So that was all signed in 2016. As of 2019, there was another UN report that said, hey guys, we're bad at this. And we're on pace for like double that. So there, they actually gave some targets over the next 10 years, which were basically cutting emissions by like 7.5% per year to get to that 1.5 degrees Celsius, or 2.7% per year to get to 2 degrees Celsius. And that timeline actually works out very well with our, that was over 10 years. That works out very well with our 12-year methane lifespan, I guess, in the atmosphere. So if you go out and do those decreases per year, it winds up being like a 55% decrease for 1/2 degrees Celsius, which we are not going to get to. But for that 2 degrees Celsius, it only actually takes a 15.8% decrease in emissions. And there was another report from a different group in the UN that basically was just looking at livestock's impact on climate change, and total emissions from all livestock supply chains were about 14.5% of human emissions, and about 2/3 of that was cows, which is a little under 10%. So it's not enough to get to a like reasonable level, but it's more than I honestly expected it to be. It's about 60% of what we need to get back to that original Paris climate agreement goal, which is pretty impressive, not gonna lie. I will say, I feel like a lot of what I did was kind of depressing because, man, we're bad at fighting climate change, and also cows are bad for the environment. But I did learn there is actually some possible help as well. One, I've learned that although America's bad at fighting climate change, it isn't really good at making efficient cows, which feels very, very American to me.
What part of the cow is efficient?
So basically, over the last 50 years or so. So I guess in 1950, the US had 25 million dairy cows, but now we only have 9 million. But with that, almost 2/3 reduction in cows, we're actually making 60% more milk than we were in 1950. Similarly, we are down about 1/3 from the size of like beef cattle herds were in the 1970s, but we're producing more beef than we were then. So just through a lot of like dietary changes and things like that, we've just managed to make our cows produce more with fewer cows.
Just these engorged milk-filled cows.
Right, which is kind of terrifying, but also kind of cool.
No, it's more on terrifying. I've seen a couple specials on
yeah, I know. It's pretty farms. Bad. The chickens are worse, I think, honestly. The chickens are pretty gnarly.
No, like the thing that got me on the cows was they had like, there was like a hole like in the side of the cow to like,
yeah.
Like that was just like left there to like, administer something or another. It was so weird and gross. I like couldn't watch it long enough to actually understand what the hell was going on with it.
It's not great. There was one less disturbing thing that I found out about cow efficiency, particularly in the United States, which is that a lot of the in addition to just having fewer cows, a lot of the problem is related to all this methane that builds up as they digest. So they try to do a lot of experiments with different supplements and things they can give cows to just help them digest things more easily, which is very funny to me. And there was a trial at UC Davis that found by making 1% of the cow's diet seaweed, they got a 60% reduction in methane emissions.
Oh, so you can just feed the seaweed instead of getting rid of all the cows. That seems like a better plan.
It does feel like a pretty decent plan, yeah. I realize now we're sort of outside of the hypothetical because obviously with no cows this isn't a problem, but I wanted to feel better about the dairy industry slightly, maybe. So I did some more research that way. I guess overall, I don't have a big flashy finish. I was going to try to figure out a way to so the other issue with saying that getting rid of all the cows would reduce emissions by 10% is that I feel like we'd probably replace them with some other meat. And a lot of that, emission is just due to fertilizer and things like that. So it probably would get replaced by other animals, which isn't ideal.
Probably pork.
Yeah, probably pork, maybe chicken, maybe goats. Maybe goats' time to shine. Who knows?
It's time for the goats. Or, well, not time for the goats. They're not going to be happy about this.
No, they're not. It's not a good move for the goats. I did try to find, I don't even know why, but I Googled literally carbon neutral animals. There aren't any. I don't know what I was looking for here, but whatever. I guess, long story short, to answer the question, do cows cause global warming? The answer is kind of, but also not really. Not as much as maybe my 8-year-old self might have thought. And I guess also, if they all went away, global warming would still happen. So sorry, guys. I was hoping to have some good news on this whole burgerless front, but no such luck.
That's right. I got some good news, Ben. I'm going to make us all rich.
Ooh.
That was a clip from Absurd Hypotheticals, the podcast where we answer dumb hypothetical questions. For the full episode, click on the link in the description.